Who the Wild Things Are with Ryan McGuire.
You gotta listen to your body.
Oh my God, maybe, I could get out there, I could do this.
Let's take a ride, find your wild side, real stories, see with your own eyes.
It's so beautiful.
I'm gonna have the best time out here.
I was in tears. I was just like, that's the best, man.
Welcome back to Who the Wild Things Are. My name is Ryan McGuire, and I'm here to bring you conversations with the most wild folks on the planet. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you enjoyed the episode, share it with a friend. Appreciate you guys. Let's get it going. All right, cheers.
Cheers.
All right, first of all, what I was thinking about was for the new series we're doing together, we left off on Workshop in the Name. What about Outside of the Box with Osborne?
I like it.
It's a little wordy.
Outside of the box.
Or outside the box. I don't know. I was thinking something like alliteration.
Mm-hmm.
Or out there with Osborne. Or just like
Out there with Osborne.
I wanted to give like the feng shui that we are discovering and talking about lesser known, lesser explored topics.
Yeah.
You know? Everyone talks about like, oh, this is how you become productive and like an overachiever, and this is how you maximize your life, and here's how I did this, and here's why I'm the best. But
I thought that's what we were doing.
that is what we're here for.
Why are you the best?
What do you think? What name pops in your mind when you think about this series?
Outside the box with Osborne. I mean, that's fun.
All right.
Overtime with because that's what you said last time.
Overtime with Osborne.
Out there with Ozzy.
Out there with Osborneo.
Out there with Osborneo.
Cool. Well, today we're gonna talk about breath work and talk about how that relates to different experiences in terms of like the effects it has on your body, your mind, your soul, and also other things, other ways that you can get similar experiences like hallucinogenetics or psychedelic compounds, and we'll move on from there. So
beautiful.
First, just me knowing you, I know that you are a relatively devout person in terms of taking your own space, own time to meditate. Like it's definitely feng shui or like very vogue to be like, yeah, I meditate a lot. And I don't think most people do.
Yeah.
I know that you actually do hold that space for yourself. So talk to me a bit about like, do you think of it in terms of routine, or is it more just whenever you feel called to sit with your thoughts that you're pursuing meditation or breath work?
That's a good question, and actually an interesting time to bring that up because I would say life has been really busy recently, and I have stopped some of those practices.
Okay.
And this was maybe a few weeks ago. I was noticing, I was like, wait, why is my head like running these loops, and why am I in these places of like more negative thoughts and ungroundedness? And was kind of realizing it's like, oh wait, I haven't been doing much breath work. I haven't been sitting and meditating and like doing these things that are essential for me to like calm my nervous system, to come back to myself, to be grounded so that I can show up in other relationships and conversations and friendships and everything in a more grounded place.
When you think about it, what do those negative thought patterns sound like? So if somebody's wondering to themselves, oh, am I also experiencing that? How would you describe those thought patterns that pop up more frequently when you're not taking the space to meditate?
I think a lot of it's just like I find this importance, or like, I think everything's important, maybe, instead of just like realizing it's like, oh yeah, that person said that doesn't affect me, or that's not directed at me, or even if it was directed at me, I'm in like a place of reason to where I know that's not real.
It's not important.
Yeah.
I find this a lot with meditation for me, and I'll share a little bit later on about my practice, but I find that as much as meditation is aimed at nothingness and being totally present in the moment and not thinking about your life and the things you have to do, I'm able to prioritize and categorize my life better than ever in the middle of a breathwork session. And I like give myself grace for that. And I'm like, oh, okay, you just really went down a rabbit hole of the things you need to get done. Let's come back to the breath and not think about that for a while. But I'm like, man, that was nice. Because I haven't seen all of those priorities in that clear of order and that clear of importance and urgency in a long time. So like, thank you. I'm glad I was able to get that done. Let's come back to the breath and focus. And there's kind of this balance. It's like, that's not the reason you want to do breath work, but it is a nice side effect.
Absolutely. And I think there's almost like I don't know, I almost see like this difference in like, okay, there's some people that are going to be sitting in the ashram for 10 years, you know, doing their meditating, thinking about nothing. And that's not a life I've signed up for. And I don't think you either. And so there's almost like a difference in like the way it's done, or like I see a bit of a difference where it's like, no, this is to help me with real life.
Okay.
Where sometimes I think meditation is like, no, this isn't real life. This is like sitting in the astral and experiencing bliss and nothingness, where it's like, I think we have glimpses of that and we have moments of that, but that's not ultimately like we're living here.
Yeah.
We're in this plane and we're doing real life shit. And that's what I want support in. That's what I want help and guidance in, and knowing how to operate in a good way.
When you are hitting your stride, and I loosely for this episode, I'm going to loop meditation and breath work together because in my life, they're very hand in hand. Most of my meditation is via breath work. You could also meditate and not be doing as focused breathing and just trying to assume like a state of like oneness and thoughtlessness. I find that very hard without a little bit of focused breath work. So for the sake of this, at least for myself, I'm going to kind of combine those two. When you're, let's just call it your solo practice.
Yeah.
When you're taking that time, what does your routine look like? How long is it? How are you breaking it up? What time of the day are you doing it? When do you know that you need to do it? All those kinds of things are what I'm curious about.
Yeah. I think that's something that's different as life changes for me. Recently, it's been basically before I go to bed, I'll go sit in the backyard and take probably 10 minutes. Not a long time. And I've been doing just like a couple different breath work styles, I guess. And so there's a bit of breathing and a bit of just sitting and thinking and calming myself, talking to myself. I use a lot of like self-talk as well.
What does that look like?
Reminding myself who I am and what is important, I think. Because I think a lot of like, yes, breath work, meditation, yoga, all these things are like, awareness is kind of the goal with it.
Sure.
Awareness and peace, I guess, or stillness. And yeah. So I think like I do a bit of like a Kapalabhati breath, like more of a forceful. And I do a little bit of like a spinal, Kundalini, I think it's called, or a style of Kundalini or breathing, just like activating the spinal cord and just knowing that like, yeah, in a lot of traditions, like that's where the light and the chakras and everything is. So bringing awareness to that and lubricating that motion.
And so it's not necessarily the same every time for you. It might just be more intuitive. Yeah,
it's pretty intuitive, but I also do like, just personally, I do really well with a bit of routine structure. Like, okay, I'm going to do this every night. Otherwise it's easy for me to be like, I'm kind of tired tonight. Don't really want to. Yeah. And so having like, okay, I'm going to do at least this. That's just to get me sitting in the backyard. And then once I'm there, then it's very intuitive. And I'm like, oh no, I need to like, I've been showing up like this and that's not really how I want to show up. So I like talk myself through that or think myself through that and come to a place with that. There's
an old saying that comes to mind for me that I love, which is, I can't remember exactly who said it, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but essentially it's about meditation, and it goes something like, if you can't take 30 minutes, you probably need an hour. So the folks that are saying, I don't have 30 minutes to go sit with my own thoughts and meditate, it's like, well, if that's actually the truth and you're being honest with yourself, then you need to go take an hour.
Yeah.
30 minutes isn't what you need. You need even more than that. And I think that's really powerful. And I try and remind myself that. So my kind of stationary in the box breath work that I've done a lot, and really got me into it actually, was the Wim Hof breath work. And I know a lot of people have different feelings on Wim Hof, you know, like, just different opinions on him, or I think the organization's called like Breath of Fire or something.
Okay.
Regardless of how you feel about him or that practice, I think that 11-minute breathing video is one of the most powerful free resources in the world.
Yeah.
I've listened to it so many times that I know every word. I can say the entire thing, not on purpose, but so I started with 30 days in a row I guess it was a couple years now because I didn't live here. And after doing 30 days, I became so reliant on it that I ended up doing it for like 6 months, almost every single day. And now I'm not quite as good, but I am pretty consistent with doing it in the mornings, and it makes a noticeable difference in my life. And now I've branched out. I've done different pranayama. I've done different like holotropic or different breathing styles. And I've also, become a facilitator in some of my courses, and kind of written my own script and scheme of how I like to organize it. But whenever, even to this day, if I'm having like a weird moment, especially lately with all the health problems, I'll just come back to it and I'll be like, my stomach is bleeding and life is very hard right now. It's hard to have energy to like clean my dish off. I need to just like go do 11 minutes of breathing and just like come back. And I've never gotten out of that 11 minutes and said, I'm mad I did that.
That was a waste of time.
That was a waste of time. Every time I come out of it like, wow, everything makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
It usually ends with me sending an I love you text to somebody, or I'm grateful for you text to somebody. Like, people in my life, a lot of times in the morning, you'll notice that, like, if you're close to me, I might send you like a early morning message, like, hey, checking in on you, was thinking this and that. And it might seem kind of random. If you ever get a text like that from me, it's probably because I just meditated. And like, I'm not like a super sentimental guy, but I can really get there after breath work and like really feel those feelings that I'm probably usually more turned off to and like closed off to.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So I've tried to share that video. It's available on YouTube, and it's got some 6 million, 10 million views or something. And
half of them were me.
Yeah. They're all me on different profiles. One of the cool things that I've seen just being on that page so many times is the different comments that get pinned. People comment on this, and it's like, sometimes it's like a really rough story, and it's like about how this breathing like helped someone getting through their dad dying, or like something super heavy. And then other people are like, it'll be a comment like this if you're here literally every day in the morning. And it's like a bunch of people liking it. So it's cool to just like understand that a lot of people are trying to improve that awareness.
Yeah.
And the ultimate message of all of it is breath work or other things in life, whether it be fasting or all these different mediums, they get your brain to a place that you can't choose to get to normally in your daily life.
Yeah.
You can access a different part of it. You can see things differently. And if you're one of those people that's ever wished, like, man, I wish I could look at this from a different angle, it's like, stop what you're doing.
There is a way.
Go breathe for 11 minutes, and it will change how you see this issue.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something that in my relationship we've been bringing in a lot more, where it's like there's times where we're in a disagreement or we're not seeing each other like clearly. Yeah. And we're just like, I'm just going to go take a few minutes, go do some breathing. Or for me, like at the end of the day, that's kind of when I do it, where it's like, it's time I'm shifting gears right now. this is what I've been carrying all day and I don't need to carry that anymore. I'm moving into this time of my day. And so I really appreciate just using that as like as a shift. And like, that was good. Maybe it wasn't good. Doesn't matter. This is where I'm going and this is where I want to be. So but I love that. Yeah. Wim Hof has been really huge for me. I actually haven't used his stuff in a little while, but there was, some big seasons where in California, when I was living there, it was during the winter a couple years ago, and I would go surf for like a very short amount of time because it was freezing, come home or walk back, do the 11 minutes. And then, and that was like warming back up as well. Cause I was like freezing from
it will generate a lot of heat if you, and there's different styles to do that specific one. Right. And this is kind of true of all pranayama. Like the intensity is chosen by how hard you breathe. That breath specifically, like some breathing techniques are based on an idea of getting CO2 out. Some of them are based on getting like holotropic breathing. A lot of times is based on getting a ton of oxygen in. So kind of the reverse. And specifically that Wim Hof one, like if you take that big breath in and you continue to do that for all 3 rounds, it can become very intense, right? You can get tetany, like, which means like your fingers start to tighten up. You'll get a lot of tingling throughout your body. And sometimes it can be like uber euphoric, like, send you to another planet kind of feeling. And then other times, and sometimes it's true for me, I'm not trying to go that deep. I just need to sit here and center and get my thoughts together. Like shit's not going how I want it to. I don't have to be super intense and like super crazy. I can just kind of have the same rhythm, but a less intense version of that breath work. And not every breath work session has to be a breakthrough. Right. Not every training session has to be a PR, and not every breath work session has to be, ending in tears and, this new revelry or sense of fight or sense of caringness. Like sometimes it can just be like, it got me back to baseline. For sure. And I feel okay now. Yeah. That's something I've been thinking about because a lot of the practices that I've been doing recently are more of like the up-regulating. And I feel like there's the up-regulating and down-regulating breath styles. And and just like what's fitting for that time, because I feel like right before bed, maybe you don't need all the build the energy, build the inner fire. Whereas maybe in the morning, that is what you want. Yeah. I've got a full day of work ahead. Like, let's go. Let's build myself up. And sometimes it's like, no, I want to calm down. I want to just like the slow, And maybe that's why when I tend to do that, when I do it in the morning, is because that one feels more like a build up. I know there are, there's a lot of apps out there that do like NSDR, which is non-sleep deep relaxation. And it's supposed to be like akin to like the amount of, I can't remember if it's parasympathetic or sympathetic, like your nervous system essentially is going to a similar place as it would when you're sleeping. So you're not actually asleep, but you're just in one of those way down regulated meditation modes. And I know Huberman talks about the advantages of that quite a bit. And my trouble with the down regulating breath work is that it ends up in me sleeping. Yeah. And maybe that's not a problem, but that's just like I'm habitually tired. So for sure. Okay, so curious. There was a season where I was doing a lot of like more holotropic and like bigger sessions, like an hour sessions. And it's like, that's some fucking work. Like keeping up that breathing. Yeah. I'd be breathing. And then pretty much every time I would wake up when they're like closing down. And whether like I just like escape to this place, blissful place sometimes they're like all this breakthrough and I'm having, I don't know if it's dreams. I don't know if I'm breathing the whole time. I guess I need to talk to the practitioners a little bit more. Yeah. But I disappear. Right. And then I come back at the end of it and it's like, sometimes it's like, whoa, that was huge. And sometimes it's like, I think I just got a nap. I don't think there's anything wrong with falling asleep either. Like if that's what your body was like, this is what we need right now to just take a little snooze, I think that's okay. For sure. But it is interesting if you've ever done a big group breathing session, like one of the more intense ones. I know you and I did one with Janelle at Archipelago, and you know, those sessions, they're intense, and a lot of people are having breakthroughs, and it's a really big, emotional, beautiful thing, and it breaks down like a ton of barriers. Like after you do a session like that, you're all breathing. A lot of people end up crying. There's no drugs involved. Everyone's just like high as shit, but there's no drugs involved. After that, everyone's walls are just like completely down.
For sure.
And you talk to someone and they're just like totally raw.
Oh.
And they're just like, my dad fucked me over so bad, and I am dealing with that right now. You know, like whatever it comes to, like grown ass men who probably haven't cried in years are just like tearing up about their divorce. And it's just wild to see like the human emotion that comes out specifically sparked just by breathing. Like nothing else happened. There was no alcohol. There was no drugs. It's like, no, I just breathed. I sucked in air through my face differently, and it changed how I see my life.
So wild.
It is crazy.
So wild. And like this, just like this breathing, we do, I think it's between 20 and 22,000 breaths a day.
Wow.
The average person. And these are like very typically like pretty short, and the more stressed and busy we are, the shorter and shallower they are. And just like the importance and the magic of like being conscious of that, being like, oh no, I'm actually going to take some big breaths. Yeah. And sometimes that's on my drive to work. It's always on my drive back from work. I'm just like, all right, that was good.
There's I've heard people discuss this with smoking cigarettes. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. So obviously, like, there's a lot of research, especially lately, on nicotine, and that like nicotine can be an effective drug for some different things, whether it's like focus or calmness or whatever. But a lot of people I've heard, I think it's a hard thing to prove. Like, you could try to do a double blind or a survey test or something, but with cigarettes, if you think about it, traditionally the way smoking at work is you work, and then everyone used to go take a smoke break, and they would all go together. And so basically you would all go sit in community elsewhere and take long, deep breaths together, and everyone would calm down. And it was like, that was like the moment that everyone craved. And it was like, sure, like maybe nicotine was a piece of it, but could it also have been that like we all gathered in community and just like went and breathed really specifically in rhythm, much deeper than we had been breathing all day, probably outside? Is that part of the comfort that comes from taking the smoke break? And that's a really interesting... I haven't
thought about that. That's really cool.
It's really interesting to think about. And I wish I could prove it or like study it more. And now, you know, a lot of people don't smoke, but
sure,
it begs the question, is our smoking and our reliance and our comfort with it tied to the fact that it's focused breathing?
That's really cool.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I want to look into that more.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it works out that way. If the
benefits way off the...
Yeah, I'm not saying that everyone needs to go smoke cigs, but it's just interesting to think about.
Do it outside with community.
Yes.
With some intentional breaths.
If you're going to go smoke a dart, do it with the homies.
Yeah.
And do some nice deep breaths and make it work. Another interesting piece of the breathwork thing that I've been exploring more lately is the idea of focused meditation healing the body. And this, we're going to lose some people here. This is going to sound woo-woo. It's going to sound crazy.
I'm excited.
Here's what I would say to anybody who's like, that's bullshit, is probably haven't been as sick as I've been recently. Because I've been fucking desperate. And it's like, anything that seems remotely possible, short of like voodoo and like pinning my enemies, I will try. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. And there's a guy named Joe Dispenza who had, I don't know his whole story. I haven't read the book, but essentially, and you may know more about him than I do, he got in a serious bike crash. Spine was completely obliterated. They're like, you're never going to walk again. You're never going to do anything again. He was a doctor, but also used basically breath work and focused meditation, and has now made the claim that that is how he came back from this unrecoverable accident, and now teaches other folks how to use breath and meditation to focus on physical ailments. So not just clearing the mind, like we're saying, or helping with prioritization or being aware and present, but actually fixing an elbow or focusing energy while you're doing your breath work on your stomach and like getting to a really deep trance place of meditation and focusing on your stomach. And can you actually have your body focus its attention on healing a certain part of your body? And it sounds really crazy until you like break it down a little further. It's like, okay, well, the brain and the body are definitely inherently connected. I can definitely do the opposite.
Yeah.
I can distract myself and not feel pain, for sure. That's 100%. Like I can prove that. Now, if I focus on the pain, can I heal it? And that's kind of how I've been thinking about it. Because when you put it in that perspective, it sounds less crazy.
Yeah.
It sounds less out there. What's your take? Have you tried any of this? Have you thought about it?
Yes.
Okay, let's
Do you
hear it.
remember 2 years ago, beginning of snowboard season? And we were basically first day up. I fell and broke my wrist. And yeah, basically went in, got x-rays. They're like, yep, it's broken. It's going to take 6 weeks.
This
Need
was
to put a cast
the
on.
when we went in the trees and you hit the thing?
That little stump, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah.
That was such a bummer.
It was. And it was also really exciting for me because I was just on this, like, Joe Dispenza was, like, listening to his stuff. And I was like, I think this shit's real.
Okay.
And, like, I haven't experienced this, but this is the time.
Okay.
And so
the wrist is broken.
Wrist
it's
is
already
broken.
done.
Yep. They're like, it's broken. We need to put it in a cast. It's going to take 6 to 10 weeks, whatever they said. And I was like naive, smart, whatever you call it. I'm like, no, I actually don't want to cast. It'll be healed in 2 weeks. And so I went home and I just like sat there. I would do like 3-4 times a day, would just like listen to some of his meditations or healing meditations. And I would like mirror with my right hand, which was fine. And just like mirror, and like, it was painful, but like doing, just envisioning every breath and every like thought is healing my wrist. And it was like a week. I was back to work. I was wearing a little brace.
Whoa.
Week and a half, I was at the gym, like fully lifting.
Wow.
2 weeks back at work, no brace, completely healed.
No way.
And this was just like every day, like multiple times a day. Was like, no, my wrist is healed. It's just like holding on to this pain, and like, believing, because I feel like we are so, we're just so capable of so much more than these boxes that society has said we're capable of.
Yeah.
And so that was just like, that was a really fun, and I was using like compresses and tinctures and like all the natural remedy stuff that I could think of. But ultimately like completely healed in 2 weeks.
Have you had any reoccurring effects from it?
No.
You don't think about it ever? It never bothers you?
No.
And you think other people could replicate this?
I do.
Does it matter if they believe it?
Yes.
So the belief encourages and allows for the physiology to happen, you're saying?
You're basically talking to every cell in your body and telling every cell how you want it to respond or how it's designed to respond. And I think that if you're, maybe, I'm not sure. Okay. The reason I say that, yes, it does matter is because it was later that spring where I stepped back into this hole, and I actually never got it checked out. So I'm not sure what happened to my back, but it was like, it took me out. Couldn't get on my bike all summer, couldn't work for a few months. And I was in a lot of pain, like for the whole summer. And it was once I was back in Peru.
And this is all back injury.
Back injury. Yeah. Like couldn't do anything that I love doing. And was really struggling, and was also really struggling because I'm like, I just watched my wrist heal like overnight almost. Why is this different? And is this because it's a back and it's affecting more of my body and I don't believe enough? Like what is it? And I was, and it was another interesting thing because I was in Peru, was talking to this friend who's a doctor, and she was saying, she's like, there's like, sometimes it's just your body holding on to the pain and it's actually healed, but like, or your mind that's holding on to the pain. And I'm like, yes, I get that. But this was also like an accident. Like I fell 4 feet down, landing
Right.
on this concrete thing, and like I injured myself.
Shit
Like this
hurt.
is an accident. So I was backpacking for a week or so, and she's like, yeah, but it doesn't have to be there. And I'm like, okay, I get you. Like, I understand to some extent. I'm like, but I'm going to try it. Every time the pain comes in, because we were like backpacking, sitting on the ground, that's all what we were doing. And then it was just like excruciating. So I'm like, okay, this is just my mind holding on to the pain. My back's healed. I'm choosing to believe this. I literally woke up a day and a half later, and like this was the evening, slept that night. The next day I was hurting. The next morning, zero pain. And it was like almost getting better as I would like every time it would start hurting. I'm like, no, just the mind. Like my back's healed. It's been plenty of time. I've done all the right things for it. And it like completely stopped. Like that stopped hurting. I was doing all the same things, still backpacking, still like sitting on the ground, sleeping on the ground, everything. And obviously you can call this whatever you want.
Sure.
But yeah, I think there's some big depth into that focused breathing, into just intention, into telling your mind what we're telling every cell. And that is what
occurs.
Yeah.
I think it's part of it is this thing that it's like, I grew up Christian, so I can only speak to Christians. One, Christians are down to pray to God for anything. But if you talk about like the locus of control being inside your body or your brain, it's like, no, you can't do that, right? And the other thing is folks are very down to believe in old miracles as long as they get to say that they don't happen anymore.
Yeah.
And in my mind, it's like, well, if we're all generally basing some of this idea that there's a God and you think that there was miracles, well, then there was no time that like there was like miracles are done. No more. We're out.
Yeah.
And so for that, like from that point of view, I don't see any argument against it, because my brain is always logical minded, for better or for worse. I can't help it. It's always like, how can I prove this, or how can I get support for this idea? And if you are a religious person, maybe the idea of saying I can focus my breath, focus my energy on a spot in my body on repetition, and I can heal that spot sounds really crazy. But now if I say the same sentence, if I sit here and I close my eyes and I repeatedly ask God to fix this spot in my body, it's going to happen. No, those might be just two different ways of looking at the same question.
Right.
While one is looked at super bush hippie and
Out
one
there,
is looked
one's-
at,
yeah.
you know, a 60-year-old white guy would do it at his house with a rosary, right? But they're kind of two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. It's a very interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting what we will accept and what we'll cast as other than. And I don't know. I've gone back and forth because for me, I haven't had the same results, right?
Yeah.
I've been sick for months now and dealing with this stuff that has been very challenging and slowed me down in a lot of ways. And part of me is like, okay, maybe this stuff isn't getting better immediately because there is a little bit higher wisdom or higher knowledge that I do need to slow down a bit. Maybe it's not in my best interest to just get right back up and bounce back like I normally would.
Right.
So yeah, it's challenging because I've focused on it a lot. I've tried to tell myself we're good. There's no more issues. I've tried to heal it. I've tried every natural remedy you can think of, and it hasn't gotten better. And so what happens, you know, when you're in that space, that's not a fairy tale ending. It's challenging.
Yeah. It's really challenging. And I don't know the answers to that.
I don't either. You just keep trying and taking it one day at a time, I guess.
Yeah.
The bright side is, the silver lining would be, you definitely gain a lot of wisdom when you're low. Example, Joe Dispenza. He's known for this now. He's the guy, the meditation healing guy. None of that is possible without this catastrophic injury.
Right.
Something that's way worse than either of us have even dealt with. Like, I don't remember exactly. My friend LP was telling me the story. This was a long time before I even knew who Joe Dispenza was. She's like, I read this book about some guy, and he got in a bike crash, and he healed himself with his mind. And I was like, that's bullshit.
For sure.
Immediately, my first thought was, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
And then, after reading more into it. But the point being, it's like, Joe Dispenza doesn't become Joe Dispenza without this heinous, horrific accident. And that's maybe what I'm trying to remember.
I think that's an important piece, because I feel like every one of my injuries, like, they're devastating because it takes me away from most of the things I love. Mm-hmm. And again, on the other side, it makes me look at things that I wasn't willing to look at, or I wasn't looking at. Maybe I was willing to, but I just wasn't looking at it. Mm. And I think these things are important. They're not something like I want or I wish on anyone, but sometimes it's like part of the story, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think that's where things like breath, meditation can maybe bring us back to seeing that silver lining and recognizing that, like, okay, my stomach's bleeding and I can't do what I want to do. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to think about the things that I do have right now, or the things that I can do. Or maybe it's just like, yeah, you do just need to slow down. Look at something else. Get into rock climbing or whatever it is,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard because, like, you can't be like, oh no, that's a good thing. Look how good of a rock climber you are now. It's like, no, that's fucked up because you want to be doing this other thing. And yeah,
it's tough. The biggest takeaway that I've had is just like, so much of my identity is wrapped up in exploring the wilderness and being an athlete, right? Like, constantly moving. And just remembering that if you can't apply physical energy in that way, that energy is going to get recycled and put into something else.
Totally.
So if something gets taken away, like your business fails, it's like, okay, your business failed, but that energy, you still possess that, and you're still you, and you can still just put it into something else. Just because you can't put that energy in the same way, in the same vein, you're still you, and you still have all of those talents and capabilities that you enjoyed about yourself. You just need to recalibrate and refocus them somewhere else. And like sitting down and actually having a meditation and breathwork practice is what allows you to see that. Because it's hard to see that, like, in the midst of everything. In the midst of everything, you're just like, this blows. I hate this. Yeah. I'm depressed. But if you remember that you can just refocus and recalibrate, it makes it a lot more manageable when you're down and out. It's also just hard to see timescape, like, in day-to-day. Like, meditation, as much as it's about being present and in the now, it also gives you awareness of, like, yo, this is just a couple months of the grander story. And nobody likes a story where the character starts out and he wins again and he wins again and he wins again. No one likes Tom Brady. Everyone hates him, right? No one likes the guy that always wins. Yeah. Everyone loves the story of the guy that gets kicked in the dirt and is Rocky Balboa, and he's pretty much knocked out. There's no way he can get up, and somehow he gets up and wins. And that's the kind of life you want to have, right? You want to have the life that's like showing resiliency. Right. And the main character just gets beaten and battered, fights through everything, comes out on top.
Yeah. The lows make you be able to really see the highs.
Yeah. It accentuates the beauty.
Yeah. It's the contrast in life, which that's something that I just notice over and over. Like, I get off to that. Like, I can't do the mundane where everything's the same and it's all like this. Like, no, I want to see, like, if I'm seeing these colors, I want to see these colors. If I want to, if I'm doing this, I want to experience this. And I think that's partially just like a natural human bent, is like we want to see the fluctuations. Yeah.
I think you have a really interesting way of talking about hard times. Like, one thing that I've picked up from you is like you never call anything bad. Like, if I ever ask you about something and it's in like a really objectively shitty spot, you'll reply with something to the effect of, it's challenging right now, or it's been complicated, but it's moving in this direction. You have a very intentional way of speaking about things and not calling them bad, but rather calling them like challenging, or it's been a big learning moment, or things like that. And I really appreciate that about you, because it's a much lazier, simpler thing to be like, yeah, it sucks right now.
Yeah.
But the way you speak about your hard times, you're framing them, letting yourself know like this is going to provoke some major growth in the future.
For sure. Thanks for recognizing that.
Do you do it intentionally?
I think so. Like, I think it's an intention originally. I think I speak maybe in ways where like I'm not aware of like, oh, I'm going to try to make this sound like it's just a good lesson, where it's like I'm experiencing the suck. But yeah, I don't think I do agree that there's bad things. That's a hard one to say. I don't know if I can fully get behind my words on that one.
Rerun it then.
I think everything's for a reason, and things happen, and that is the hardest things in my life have been the most growing, and I'm who I am now because of those things. And I feel like, yeah, even something Hannah and I have been talking about, like there's been challenging things, and I'm like, we're going through this right now because this is building our platform for where we're going to go.
Yeah.
And yeah, sure, things are rocky, things are rough, and that's not fun, but I know what it's doing. It's building my character. It's building my strength, and it's building my capacity to be able to hold these other things that are going to come at me in life. And when I can see like, oh wow, this really sucks, but this is also like, without this sucky thing, I wouldn't develop the muscles, or I wouldn't develop the strength to get through this that I'm actually really going to need over here for this next thing that I don't know about yet. That would, if it was just for that thing without this, it'd probably take me out.
Right.
But because I'm going through this and learning to handle like my emotions, your emotions, this thing, that thing, it's like, okay, now I'm building my capacity, and like now I'll be able to face these things, or I'll be able to help lead these things, or show other people maybe that there's a way out, that there's a way through.
Yeah.
So I think yes and no.
Do you believe that everything happens for a reason?
I think there can be reason found for everything that happens, but I don't. That's a hard one. I'm not fully sure about that. It's interesting because I have like playing in the back of my head like all these different things that I've been taught and told growing up, and some of them I haven't like fully sat with to be like, oh, where do I actually stand on this now? I remember hearing this and I would quote this,
right? But
is that actually what feels right? What feels true?
Example.
I think the one that was just popping in my mind is like, everything works together for good.
That's
like,
more like Christian background.
Yeah, that's like a part of a Bible verse.
Okay.
And I know it goes on to everything works together for good for, yeah, I'm not tracking that part right now. But yeah, just like some different ideas are like, God has a plan. There's a reason. This is happening for something good. And it's like, there's part of me that like fully backs with that. And I'm like, no, that's true. Like everything, there will be good that comes out from this. And maybe I see that, maybe I can correlate that, maybe I can't, but it still will. And then there's part of me that's like, that was actually, I don't see there's any good for that. Like maybe I learned not to trust that person, but I don't, yeah. What about you? Do you think everything happens for a reason?
I reframe it as things usually work out. And I'm very careful about how I think about that, because I've thought about this question a lot of times. I've read a lot of like philosophy from Immanuel Kant to St. Thomas Aquinas, and thought about natural law quite a bit, and obviously a lot of like religious background. And where I've landed is that not everything happens for a reason.
Okay.
But luckily, I have a very privileged life, and things pretty much always work out.
Yeah.
I believe there are things so terrible that they don't happen for a reason. I know evil people that came out evil and are still evil. Mm-hmm. And I've seen really evil things in my life. We had a close family friend that she was getting dropped off by her dad. They were split up. And she was begging. She really wanted to hang out with her dad that night. She was a little girl. She was young at this point. And her dad's like, no, you got to go to your mom's house. Drops her off at her mom's house. Dad goes back to his house, goes upstairs to take a shower. 2 guys walking with shotguns, blow them all away. 9 family members, including the children, father, everyone. So that girl lived her entire life with her entire family murdered. And then later on, her mom remarried and they got in a fatal car accident. And so there are situations in which things are so terrible that it's hard for me to believe that all of that worked out for a reason, that there was some divine plan for her to live her best life because everyone she loved was murdered. It's just a hard sentence for me to steal, man.
Yeah.
What I will say is just about everything in my life has worked out for good. I've even seen that, like, I've had a lot of death in my life, and I've seen certain situations where I actually thought the death saved people future hurting, right? It seemed like somebody was taken, and it was like, now that we look at that situation, it looked like it was about to get really bad, you know? And so death is not always an exception to that rule.
Right.
But I think sometimes things are so horrible, it's hard for me to believe that everything happens for a reason. I think a lot of, like, the story I just said is a first world story that happened in America. I think if you go to third world countries, there's 1,000 of those stories. When I was doing missionary work in Guatemala, the incest and rape and physical abuse and poverty is so incredibly visceral when you're there that it becomes very hard for me to be like, yep, God or the universe or the Great Spirit has all of this under control, and this is working out how they planned it. That's a very hard thing to get behind for me personally. What I will say is, like, almost everything in my life has worked out pretty damn well, and I've learned something that has helped me later on in those experiences, like you're mentioning.
Yeah.
That's where I stand. I know that's kind of a gnarly like thing to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it is in one sense, but it's also like, I think it's kind of,
I think we're all contemplating, does everything work out for a reason, right? That's
for sure.
That's one of, like, the great mysteries of existential philosophy. Is this all a plan?
Right.
Right. It's like, is this all for the greater good? And I think we contemplate that. And I'm not saying that my opinion is right. Maybe it all is happening for a reason. I just can't see it. That's possible.
I know. I feel like we do have we have our perspective.
Yeah. Maybe things have to be exactly how they are.
Yeah.
But it's just hard for me to get behind that argument when I see how much hurt and anguish there is in the darker parts of the world. It's very easy to say when you have a really good life, like, shit always works out. It's like, my parents got divorced, but then this, like, all led to great things, and they met, like, new people. Because, like, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to you is, like, your parents getting divorced. Yeah. Not you, like, watching your whole family get murdered. So it's there's definitely, like, different magnitudes.
Totally. And I think that's, like, where it was hard, and even, like, catching myself. I'm like, no, because I know of things, whether we're looking at, on the other side of the world, like, things that are happening where it's like, no, I can't make any reason out of this, and I'm never going to, like, make an excuse or, like, validate or say it's okay because, this will be something great one day. Like,
right. It's hard. It feels a little ignorant too. Yeah. It feels a little unfair for us to say that, in my opinion. Yeah. Not that, like, my words are connected to anybody else's life another way, but it does feel a little bit unfair to say, like, oh, don't worry, it's going to work out for you. Yeah. I know you're in a civil war. It's about to work out for you. Yeah. It's tough. But I think ultimately, like, wrestling with all of those, like, existential things can be really fucking hard. Like, life is hard, and especially, it seems like, for whatever reason, it's the hardest mentally, and I might get hit on for this. It is the hardest for young men to deal with. We're the worst at coping with it. We are the most likely to kill ourselves, and it's not close. Men I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but like 30 to 50, right? Or maybe it's 20 to 50, like kill themselves in much greater proportion than women or people of other ages. And that's why I think these conversations are important, not just breath work, but all the conversations we have on here, is to share the messages of these things with people that are feeling like that kind of angst and depression. Like, yo, there is a way you can sit down and breathe a little bit differently than you're breathing right in this moment. Put your phone away for a minute and just breathe, and you'll actually feel significantly better and have a much greater understanding for what's going on around you.
Right.
And that's the goal of this, right?
Totally. Yeah, giving examples or showing our way, showing ways that we've seen, or just that there's always other options.
Yeah.
Always, and just, like even just like the different health benefits of just taking this breath to a little bit slower, a little bit bigger, calming, like, stress
Instantly
relief.
you can feel it.
Yeah.
There's another one that I do in my courses. So I do a survival priorities lesson, and one of the main ones about survival priorities is a calm state of mind in order to address a real life survival situation. So whether it's like hemorrhaging or like the ABCs, like airway, blood flow, circulation, like if your fucking liver is falling out of your stomach, what do we do before I jump on you and like start yelling and freaking out? And this is taught pretty universally throughout wilderness first aid and wilderness responder schools, is like to take a deep breath, or like to breathe is the first thing you should do as the responder, is to breathe. But what they don't do is they don't tell you how to breathe. And so I make sure in my courses every time to give someone a specific cue. And I've heard this called like an enlightenment breath, but it's essentially 3 consequential nose breaths followed by a mouth exhale. So it sounds something like, and it's very relaxing and calming and like very centering. And I think Huberman has actually talked about like the physiological studies. You don't really even need to look at the studies. If you do this at home right now and you take 3 consecutive nasal breaths and let it out through your mouth, you'll feel it. It's a very obvious thing that it's like changing the pattern of your body. It's allowing you to stop for a second.
Loosens my shoulders.
Yeah.
I just feel that way. It's like, oh.
Okay, now what are we going to fix? What needs to happen here? We don't all need to be crazy. Let's address the problem. We're good. Let's figure this out. And I think that's a tool. And I want this episode to be practical in nature. Like all the podcasts, I don't want them to be like, you should breathe. It's like, okay, that's helpful. Thanks. It's like, no, like what video should I listen to?
For sure.
What kind of breath should I do? Right? I want these to be practical so that folks can actually like get something tangible out of them.
I like that.
When you look at the best breathwork session, or like the most profound session, when was it? What did it feel like? What did you go through?
Wow, that's hard. I'm thinking of this one. I was in Southern California and did this one session. I think actually the facilitator was on Zoom. There was a group of us just like at a house down there, and it brought up so much trauma from the past.
Really?
And it was like so fucking painful, and felt like huge breakthrough. And so like there's that kind that was very memorable and very amazing. And then there's other ones where it's just like, when I was just a couple months ago working out in Georgia, like there was a couple that I 10-15 minute little video. We just sat in the living room and did some breathing, and it was like, that was like brought me back just so grounded. I'm like, oh wow, it's that easy.
It is that easy.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable. And it's weird. I want to ask you a question about the first thing you said there, but why is there so much friction to it? Like, why is it hard to get us there?
Yeah.
Like, I've been practicing this pretty devoutly for a long time. And even still, when I'm going to meditate, I'm like, I don't even really want to do it. And so now I do this thing. It's like, I just do one round. I just commit to one round, which is like 3-4 minutes. And like, if you want to be done after that, you can be done. I've never stopped after one round, because once I do a round, it's like, obviously I'm gonna do 3 rounds. I might do 10. Like, but it's like, why is there this resistance to it, even though I've never once had a bad experience? It would be like, you know, every time, for example, this is just like an analogy, but every time, let's say, I take my shirt off in the sun, I feel amazingly happy and I have a great day. But for some reason, every time I go out there, I'm like scared to take my shirt off. That's what it would be akin to.
Okay.
It's like, I know this thing is amazing. It's always been great 100 out of 100 times.
Yeah.
But for some reason, there's like this friction, and I have to get myself to do breath work.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, it's called work for a reason, I guess. I guess, yeah, because I feel the same way, where like it's not easy. It's not something that I'm like, oh, yay, let's go do breath work.
Right.
Sometimes I guess it maybe is, but yeah, I think of it as more of like if we're going to go do a burpee workout.
Yeah.
Burpee broad jumps. I hate those. I always feel great afterwards, and that like I put in the work, but like I don't enjoy that at all.
Yeah.
And so talking about doing that, I'm like, no. Whereas like, yeah, I feel like breath work is maybe a bit similar, where it's like, no, I'm going to actually like, this isn't chill.
It's so obviously affects my life that even when I'm having a rough day, Nicole's like, oh, why don't you go like do your breath work? Because like she knows instantly whatever is going on, if I'm having a bad day, it'll like turn it around. It's like 99 out of 100 times it's going to solve every problem, or not solve the problems, but give me a new outlook on them to the point at which I can love everybody in my life without apprehension and not be tuned out because of some problem.
Yeah.
Almost every time the breath work works, but still there's like this resistance to it. And then like somebody else tells me to go do it, and I'm like, yeah, I should go do it, shouldn't I? I should go just sit and meditate for a while.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
I don't know why we have that resistance. What I wanted to ask you about was a little bit more about that experience, the traumatic one, and you can share whatever you feel comfortable with.
For sure.
I've also had some as a student in breathwork classes, and I've also had some that I've facilitated that have been like super intense.
Yeah.
Lots of tears, sometimes yelling, like really intense moments for folks. And I'm curious if you can paint that picture to someone of like that has never done breathwork. Like how would you even get there? What is it about the breathwork that gets you there?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where holotropic or psychedelic, it can be a very psychedelic experience, which I'm trying to remember. The word psychedelic means mind manifesting or mind awareness, but basically bringing more awareness to the mind. And this experience for me was like bringing me back to a memory or to abuse that I had completely forgotten about. Didn't know that this person abused me in that way. And it brought me back to when I was a little kid, where I was, and like basically re-experienced this trauma. And it was just like in my whole body, and it was just like painful. And and I think it just like gave me a glimpse into this story that I had blocked, I guess. And like, yeah, sometimes I wonder like, what's the reason for that? I guess so that I can maybe process that a bit more.
Yeah.
And was able to, go back and like, whether that's forgive this person or forgive myself for getting myself in that position, however that looks. I think it's just a way of seeing more of what we already have. Cause I think we store a lot, whether it's in our body, whether it's in our mind, that we're not aware of always. And so it's bringing more awareness to what I've been storing unconsciously.
And I think this goes back to what we were saying. Like, it's so hard. Like, you're a very in touch man. If you walk past you in the grocery store, you'd be like, that guy's brolic. Like, he's a stud. but like I know you, and I know you're a very sensitive, in touch man. For a lot of men, it would be hard for them to sign up for something
Sure.
where they're going to cry about their childhood.
Yeah.
Right? That's like that's a hard sales pitch. Mm-hmm. Come to breathwork. Cry about your childhood. Most guys would be like, I'm good. I'll pass.
I'll take a pass.
So my question for you as a facilitator and a guide is, how do we change the feelings towards these kinds of experiences?
I think recognizing that it's already there and you're not finding out something new, you're not experiencing something that's outside of you. It's something you're already holding. And so I'm not sure if this is a great sales pitch, but like, it's already here. Like, can we just look at what we already have? Can we see what's here and be able to, like, it's in here, it's unconscious, but it's still taking up space. Can I look at it and be able to open up that space for something that I want in there more than that?
I just got like automotive in my head when you said that.
Okay.
Like, let's get an air compressor and blow out, the lines.
Yeah.
And let's see what's in the engine.
Yeah.
And let's see where the problems are, and let's see where things need to be oiled and what parts need replaced. And like what's in here that can be removed and simplified.
Yeah.
And get under the hood of
For sure.
kind of your psyche.
Which I feel like is a scary thing, or
For
can
sure.
be a very scary thing, because like,
I'd rather just run poorly. The truck sounds like shit, and just let it keep running like shit. It's still getting me from point A to point B.
Exactly. And just like, yeah, that check engine light, I'll just put a piece of tape over that, and like, we're all good.
We're all good.
Whereas like, yeah, that's one way of doing it, and I did that for a long time. And then I was like, wait, something's actually not running right though. And I don't really want to know why it's not running right, but I know I can make it run better.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
That's a good point.
And so it may be, look under the hood of the car and it's like, oh fuck, that's wrong, and that's bad, and this needs replaced. That's expensive. That's work. That's going to cost me. And also the result is going to be a happier car, a happier me, a better experience of life. And yes, maybe I do need to go there, and I do need to be this tough man that's now crying about being a kid or from when I was a kid, but maybe that's just going to like save my best friends or my relationship, or make this next year, this next 10 years that much more enjoyable, because I can have that space that was holding on to this traumatic memory, and now I can hold the love that I'm feeling here.
Yeah. I wish that there wasn't such a stigma about it. Like, I've held some breathwork stuff here, but I wish like it was easier to do it, just like get the homies together and do breathwork.
Yeah.
It feels like there is an obstacle to that. It's very easy for us to get together and all do a workout. It's harder to get our friends together and just be like, yo, let's go do some breathing.
It's
because
true.
there is something about, I do 99% of my breathwork sessions alone. There is also something about doing a breathwork session in a group that maybe encourages breakthroughs. Because like you see everyone else into this thing. I could almost put it a similar feeling into yoga, right? Like yoga is a great practice to do it alone, but also when you're flowing or in your shavasana and everyone's around you, or you're doing a sun salutation and you're all doing it together in like the same frequency and velocity. Like there's something nice about the human element of meditation when you're all meditating together.
For sure.
And that's probably why a lot of monks and monasteries are groups, right?
Yeah.
They're meditating 10 hours together, like all in the same area, because it's not as sustainable as a solo wolf. I don't know how you bring that into actualization, but Breath Night Tuesdays.
I think so.
Led by Osborne.
Osborne.
Cool. Well, this is an important conversation, and
Yeah.
I think hopefully it sets off a spark for some people out there. I think this is going to really, really reach some people, and hopefully it'll be applicable in real life and not just words.
Mm-hmm. I hope so.
And
I think
lead
so.
to practical change.
Yeah.
For me too. I need
Absolutely.
to listen back to this and remind myself that how important it is.
Yeah. I appreciate you. Appreciate
you
your your intention and your heart with it all.
If
And
you
for having me on.
If you had one recommendation, someone that's listening to this and they're like, okay, that was great. Give them one piece of advice how to do their first breathwork session right now. What would you advise?
I would advise sitting with yourself or actually even if it's on the drive to work, just slowing down and taking bigger breaths. Like even if it's just right here, like instead of my normal, like, and then working maybe even with like a triangle or a box where you breathe in for 4, start with 4 seconds, hold it for 4, exhale for 4, hold it for 4. And then maybe up that. Maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10 seconds in, hold it 10, out 10, hold it 10. Just slowing down your breath and being, I think paying attention to your breath is a big piece. And watch like, okay, I'm feeling really stressed. I wonder how my breath is right now. And just like noticing how you're breathing. And then maybe implementing like, okay, I'm just going to slow it down. I'm going to fill up my lungs. We have big lungs and we use like such a fraction of them in general, and just use more of your lungs.
I love it. Take a minute, take a deeper breath.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be formal. Doesn't have to be anything crazy.
And then after that, I love just like deep breaths, big inhale, big exhale. Don't even have to hold it. Do 10 and then hold it at the exhale and do just a couple rounds of that. And just like, yeah, what's life showing me right now?
Yeah.
What do I need to see right now?
It'll be amazing how effective it is.
These last few weeks doing it every day before going to bed has been such a difference in the way I can show up.
It's beautiful. All right, dude. Appreciate you.
Cheers.
Till next time, guys. Stay
Yep.
wild.